Welcome to the second episode of Turbulence FD inside LightWave. This episode is full packed with useful informations, tips and tricks, and setting explanations. If you don't want to miss any kind of this information, make sure you grab a coffee, a tea, or whatever you like, make you comfortable, and watch this tutorial until the end. It's absolutely worth it. So thanks for your time and let's get started. This is the scene that we are working on. As you can see, we have a candle, a flame, which is moving natural in the wind, pretty cool. And you can see we have a light in the scene as well that is flickering. This is a great addition to add more realism into your fire simulations. So I will show you how to set that up. I also changed the setup. As you can see, I have a new mouse cursor here, this dot in the screen, a mouse icon that show you which key I press on the mouse, left mouse button, right mouse button, middle mouse wheel, and also the corresponding key. So here I press Alt, the left mouse button, to orbit around the scene like this. If I press any other key on the keyboard, you can see it down here, what kind of key I press. Please let me know in the comment if this is useful, if you find that this addition is really cool and you want to see this in all the future tutorials as well. As you can see, the scene is very simple, just the floor, the candle, light, HRI, and of course the fire. If I switch to the timeline, is already cached. I can pick up a very nice shot and I can show you how the scene looks like. So this is the scene, and as you can see, it looks very nice depth of field. Everything looks better with depth of field, right? If you want to learn how to set up a scene like this, please check out the All About Lighting tutorial series or the main channel video tutorial on top of the channel page. It's a full tutorial how to set up a scene, how to set up light, how to work with cameras and stuff like that. So check it out. If you download an asset, an FBX or an OBJ, then these objects comes in with separate layers, separate objects, which is the best way. Or they come in as one single mesh, like in this case. This candle was one single mesh, and I want to split the fire part, which I can use as an emitter, and the candle. So for that object, I had to go inside LightWave Modeler, and I had to import this FBX of this candle, and here I have to split the fire part from the candle. Just a really quick modeler introduction. You can see down here, point edges polygon. You can press the spacebar to switch between these modes. We are on the polygon mode. Select polygons, go to selection, expand once, press Control, copy, and delete. Create a new layer and press Control V. And then you can see you have just this small part inside a new layer. So rename this, double click it and call this fire part and rename the candle. Okay, save the file and you're ready to go. All right, so I open up my candle start scene and we can focus on the fun part, create some fire. As you can see here, LightWave Turbulence FD tab. If you don't see this tab, check out the first episode. There is an explanation on how you can bring in this tab inside LightWave layout. So I have these two separate parts, the candle and the fire part. So I select the fire part and make emitter, and this new window pops up. In this case, we choose single object. The radius is linked to the voxel size. I wrote the documentation and it says when this radius here is smaller than the voxel size, it's creating artifacts around your emitter. I found out that the radius setting and the voxel size setting has to match. So if my voxel size is 2 millimeters, I set this radius to 2 millimeters as well. And it works for me, and it gives me this result that I expected. So we come back later to this setting here. Then the tab texture and forces, we're looking in the further tutorials. The channel tab, it's important because here we have to set on the channels that we need. In this case, temperature and density, set that to 1. So we close this window down for now, and now we create a container right there and rename this container whatever you like. I call this my candle fire. Press OK, and it's popping up this window here, and when we scroll out you can see that this box is huge compared to the small candle. So in this case I reduced the size of my container to about 0.1, 0.3, 0.1, and you can see that the container is now smaller, and I raised up just a touch right there. So make sure that the entire emitter part and your entire object is inside that box. Otherwise, your fire will be not show up. So the next thing is go to simulation, temperature, make sure it's active, go to density and turn it on as well. It's turned off by default, I don't know why. Just make sure to turn it on. Every time when you start the simulation, your cache file will be overridden. When I started with Turbulence FD, I set it up a fire. I was very happy with the fire, with all the settings. It works great, and I had a cache file. I make some changes in the settings to testing out, and I simulate again, and the cache was overridden. So I lost my beautiful fire. To don't have this issue accidentally, you can lock the cache, so now it's not getting overridden. If you need to have a separate or another variation of your cache file, then you can open it up. You have two possibilities. Even you can calculate the simulation via your graphic card or via your processor. As you can see, my system is no longer the newest one. It already has some years, but it's still a decent computer where I can do all my work. The difference between this is if you're simulating over your processor, I make a test. I did a test on my system and I run the simulation via the processor. It took about 2 minutes to calculate. I did the same fire setting and calculating via the graphic card, and it took about 7 seconds. I don't know if this difference is in all systems or just on my system, I don't know. I recommend to use, if you have a decent graphic card, and I have an RTX 2080 Ti, which is not the newest one, to be honest, but it's a good card. It gives me all the performance I need for my daily work. And the simulation calculations, as you can see here in a moment, it runs very fast as well. So let's press start and see what I get. All right, so as you can see that now the first simulation is cached and we have our fire, but it looks not that impressive, right? So you can see that the voxel size is way too big. So how we can visualize the voxel size? So here there is a setting, turn that on, and as you can see now we have this voxel size, and the voxel size you can see it here as well, so it's 2 centimeters. So every voxel is about 2 centimeters. The lower this value is, the finer and more detailed your fire will be. Be careful, if you go too low, the calculation times and the file size increases a lot. So work on the bigger voxel size and then decrease it slowly until you find a very nice result. I made also some tests in this scene, and I found out that a voxel size of about 2 mil is a good size for my voxels in this specific setting. Remember the radio setting I told before in the emitter here, and I set this radius the same size as the voxel size. So I put this down to 2 mil as well. Let's press start again and see what happened. And remember I told you that you can lock the cache and the cache gets overriding over and over again. It's asking you every time if you want to really override your simulation. In the most cases you want that, but as I said before, if you don't want, lock or use another cache folder. In this case, press yes, and now it's calculated. And you can see that the fire is calculated. Turn off the voxel size, so you can see that here is my fire. And when the visualization port is set to none, it shows you a kind of a heat map where the white parts, the green parts is the hotter one, and the blue is getting colder. But you can change this to fire. And now as you can see, we have the fire shader in the viewport. Now you can see that the fire or the flame is huge, right? It goes about 30 centimeters above the candle. So how we can change this fire to be more candle-like? And this you can change in the rendering tab, fire shader, color and opacity. And you can see here, you can change different settings. The temperature, the white points, damping, red, green, blue, all that stuff. The color mode is set to black body. You can also choose a manual gradient, but for fire, just use the black body. It's a very nice gradient to representing fire. So the first thing I do is increase the temperature of the fire to 3500. And now you can see that the fire is better visible because it's hotter now. So how we can change the size to more a candle size? We jump back right into the simulation tab, into temperature. You can see that we have different settings for the temperature, right? So, and here we have the cooling. To drop it down the fire, we have to increase the cooling percentage, right? And I found out in this specific case, 35% of cooling is resolved in a nice result. Let's press start and see what's happened. So now you can see that the flame is way smaller. All right, and this looks really nice to me. All right, so to give the flame a little bit of more natural movement, we can go to the turbulence settings. So these settings here are a bit strange to me. I have to research even more what these settings actually means and how these settings actually work and in what context they are, because these settings are not clear for me. Here set turbulence intensity, and the value is set to meter, which means a distance, okay? But an intensity for me is 0% or 100%. 50% is mid intensity, or is a value from 0 to 1. Why this setting is set to meter? Maybe someone of you knows, and please write it in the comments. I have to do some research even more on these settings. But what I found out in my file here, in this specific file, I found out that 0.2 and 0.3 in the turbulence speed gives me this result I'm looking for. All right, so the calculation is done, and you can see that the flame is reacting in a natural way with this setting. All right, let's close this window. Everything is set it up. We are happy with the fire. we are happy with the setup of the fire overall, and now we need a light that is flickering with the movement of the candle. So come up here, create item, create light, and create a point light. Call this firelight and press OK. So this firelight is now into the scene, and we move it up and we place it right underneath here. Check on the VPR and see how the light affects our candle, and that looks good to me. Then we go into the light properties, make the intensity very low because we are in a very small size, and then change the color to something orangey yellowish, right? So something like that. Let's start the VPR and see what we get. And you can see that we have now this beautiful subsurface scattering happens with the light itself here. Right there. Just move the candle to a certain point. As you can see that it looks very nice to me. Alright, so how we can make this firelight flickering. This is very simple. If you select the light, go to properties, you can see here that you have the light intensity, okay? And there is an E beside this setting. So every setting that has this E envelope beside, you can make changes over time. So click on the E, and what we can do here is we can use a modifier, right? So add a modifier, texture channel, double click, set it to Y, go to texture, and load in a procedural texture. So you can see that the scene has changed and the intensity of the light has changed as well, okay? And it's creating this frequency based on this turbulence noise. When we now press play, you can see that the light is flickering based on this turbulence. And you can see that it changes the intensity over time with simple clicks, right? And the modifier does everything for you. You can use, I don't know, let's choose the FBM, which is a bit more variation in, and you can play around with this procedural textures. Close this down, and as you can see, voila, you have your candle fire, you have the flickering light, and if I stop this and find out a nice frame, you can render it out as a still image, and as you can see here, it's the same still image that I used for the thumbnail, and you also can render out a animation sequence, and you have a nice candle light. So I hope this tutorial was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to post it down below in the comments. As always, thank you very much for your time, for your listening, for your watching, and see you next time in the next tutorial. Thank you and bye everybody.